I always say everybody dies, and then people go, does that include you? And I go, yeah, but I just have to be last.
Hey, it's Chris. Thank you for checking out this video. And were you looking at my nutsack? Yeah, you were totally looking at my nutsack, and I don't blame you because this thing is epic. So the reason it's called nutsack is because they were told they were nuts to manufacture in America. This specifically is the Tacksack 13 from Nutsack. I actually had 3 people while I was wearing it yesterday go, that thing is awesome. It's called the Tacksack 13 because, wouldn't you know it, a 13-inch laptop fits inside here perfectly. I've been using it recently for my in-person interviews as a gear bag. But it also fits a laptop, it fits books, it fits anything that you might put in a backpack inside here. The inside is filled with molly loops, which is great for storing those things that in a regular bag would be rattling around in the bottom. But I think most importantly, the Tacksack 13 just has this rugged, manly look to it, especially compared to a backpack or a briefcase, because it's made with this waterproof waxed canvas. There's also the Jones 13, that's also an option. It's the same bag, but in a classy leather finish. Check this out. Got the magnets to really make sure it stays closed. There's also some great mods and add-ons like this. This is the admin pouch, which fits inside the Tacksack 13, but it's the perfect size for things like your phone, your keys, your wallet, even headphones. I really just can't say enough good things about the Tacksack 13. I mean, obviously it looks great, but the functionality is incredible. Click the links below the video, use the code CVV, and you'll get $10 off your purchase of $100 or more with free US shipping. Then everybody will be looking at your nutsack. Lance, welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
We've talked about making this happen for a while, and here we are, we're doing it. Finally. Your hair has never looked better, I think.
That's what I say each time she does it, because she does a good job, but you know.
How much of this is your actual hair?
Now it's actually kind of easier to tell where the blonde is. That's actually my hair, because I bleached it out right before the Moxley match.
So when you go through, you know, the rest of like your regular life with hair like this, what are the reactions that you get from people?
Well, the funny thing is I think the hair has actually become as much or more recognizable than I am. You know, and especially in this world we live in where everybody's wearing masks and stuff and your face is covered. I get stopped all the time just because they recognize the hair. They see the hair. If it's in, when it's out, it's a little bit different. Like, I didn't have it in the other day, and some guy saw that we had, you know, AEW masks on, and he was like, "Oh, you guys like that AEW?" And I was like, "Yeah, just a little bit, you know." And then he was informed that, you know, I work there, and he's like trying to figure it out. And then, you know, I didn't have the braid in, so I was like, "Yeah, I don't have the hair." And, you know, the Murderhawk Monster, Vance Archer, he goes, "Oh my God!" Like, he freaked out once he figured it out. But like, not having the hair in is such a signature thing right now. So,
right, who came up with the name, the Murderhawk Monster?
I did, I guess. Yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, I changed the hair. So last year when the G1 happened, you know, it was one of those situations where I took it upon myself. I was like, this is a big opportunity for me. You know, initially I wasn't even in the G1 for that year. They were starting in Dallas. I was going to be on that show, but then I was included into the G1. And, you know, I've been a part of a great tag team, KES, Killer Elite Squad, for many years. And this was my first real coming out party as a singles wrestler in New Japan since before Smith had joined New Japan, you know, back in 2012, and KS had gotten started. So yeah, I did everything I could to change every part of me that was known to the wrestling world, you know, and the G1 was such a huge platform. We were going to be live on Access TV in the United States of America. New Japan Pro Wrestling was. So it was just one of those situations where I was like, I'm going to change everything. And the initial hair was not the braid. It was more of a crazy poofed up mohawk thing. And, you know, we started calling it, you know, this crazy mohawk and this and that. And I was like, oh, it's not a mohawk, it's a Murderhawk. And then I was like, oh, it's morphed into the Murderhawk Monster, you know, and just, you know, everybody's had their little monster monikers in the professional wrestling world throughout the history and time of the business. But I just thought it was fun to say Murderhawk Monster.
You know, when you look at all the different looks you've had since your career started, like it's evolved like a ton.
Yeah. Somebody posted a video from early TNA stuff, and I had the long hair, but it was kind of bleached blonde in different areas, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's the same dude." People not realizing that I was the same guy that then as I am now, and so on and so forth. It's fun. It's been an interesting morph. I think anybody that's had a long career has had a lot of different images and looks for the most part. A few guys get lucky and catch a gimmick that just lasts throughout history and time that they never have to change. But even some of the biggest names in the business, the Stone Cold Steve Austins and the Kanes, and even Undertaker prior to being Undertaker, he had his images and stuff prior to that, and so you start looking at those guys and the history of who they were, granted, again, much more successful people than I've been, but at the same time, you have to understand that, it's the entertainment world and things morph and change. And I think you have to adapt. If you don't, you can grow stale really quick and die off really fast.
Has anybody told you with the current facial hair that you have now that you kind of look like Liev Schreiber?
No, I modeled after Lemmy from Motorhead.
Totally. I don't know. It's just something about the shape of your face. I'm like Liev Schreiber. You look just like him. This is a great compliment.
No, he's very handsome like man. Me. He looks like me. He looks like me. I don't look like him. There you go.
That is it. Yeah. After you've been everywhere in your wrestling career, you've worked for everyone.
I've been fired from a lot of places. Yeah.
Did you foresee AEW becoming a possibility?
I don't know. It was one of those things like, when all this really started last year, and it all started close to about this time, it was December of 2019, when I just finished up the New Japan Tag League tour literally 2 days prior, and then AEW came to town to Dallas, Texas. And so I went there to just see some friends and whatnot, because there's a lot of people there that I've been around the business with and become really good friends with. And that was kind of where I think the seed was planted, just because people were asking, what my situation, and at that time, my situation with New Japan was that I didn't have a full-time contract. I was still running under the old system, the tour by tour. That's kind of just how they did business with the Gaijin, the foreigners, through the history of wrestling. It was just, you show up, you sign a little deal, you work the tour, that's your contract. When it's done, you're finished as far as that contract's concerned. But I'd done that for, at that point, 8.5 years with New Japan. And so I didn't go looking for a job, but ultimately that's kind of what happened, and I've been lucky and blessed in a lot of different ways. Like you said, I've worked in a lot of different places, from TNA to WWE for a short cup of coffee, showed up in Ring of Honor a few times, worked down in Mexico, AAA, and different places like that, so I've bounced around. I've been a journeyman, to say the least.
Well, your debut is like so impactful. Did you know when you signed on that you were going to be tossing around Marco's stunt in your debut?
No, I had no idea. There's obviously lots of different, ideas and thoughts as to exactly what my debut was going to be. Even just the walkout with Jake and I in Salt Lake before the world shut down was, that was kind of a morphed thing. It had gone back and forth with being more action packed to an actual match to different things. And then it was decided, we'll just do it more subtly with you and Jake just kind of sauntering out there and sitting by ringside and, maybe acting like you're going to come over the rail, but then, Jake's the voice of reason, the evil voice of reason, to say the least. And then the debut, which, we did everything in Atlanta for that was when everything really shut down. And before, wrestling as we are knowing it now was really going. It was really the initial deals, working, and we did it, working with our peers as audience, and just that little bit of ambiance, that sound, even our guys and girls, yelling and screaming and booing and cheering helped tremendously. Not having to do that in an absolute dead, empty arena was so much better than, the unfortunate aspects of a lot of wrestling when it first started and went down.
Yeah, and I feel like, Marco is so small. You are so big by comparison.
Right.
Was there any limitations of like, all right, man, like I could literally do anything to you? Were there any limitations on that match?
No, none whatsoever. And Marco, he's a tough little son of a bitch, man. He's one of those guys that you look at him and you see him, and if you don't know him, you're like, man, he's just, like you said, he's such a small dude, but he is a tough little dude, man. He got tossed and thrown and from here to Timbuktu in that match, especially. And, that's been his whole career, and he's still running and gunning, going. And full of spunk, fight, and attitude, man. You have to respect him for that. I say everybody dies, and somehow he survived. I let him live. I tossed him and killed him and destroyed him, but I didn't want to just completely end his life.
I'm glad you brought up everybody dies, because I think a lot of people look at that as like, Lance Archer could kill everybody. Everybody dies. But I think there's also like a double meaning to that, like almost questioning your own mortality. Everybody dies. Let's try to cram in as much as we can while we're alive here.
Right. I always say everybody dies, and then people go, does that include you? And I go, yeah, but I just have to be last.
Is there a certain element of that though, where it's like, everybody dies. So I got to realize that there's opportunities in front of me. I got to take those things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Again, I've, like you brought up, I've been around the world in this business of professional wrestling, from every company here, there, and everywhere. And there's been a lot of opportunities that have stepped in front of me that I didn't take full advantage of. So definitely there's kind of that underlying meaning to everybody dies. And it's like, everybody's career ends at some point. I've been lucky and blessed over 20 years now and still going strong, and at a top level with a top company in the business of professional wrestling. So I'm beyond blessed. But at some point it will come to an end. I don't know when, and I don't plan on it being anytime soon. But this has been my biggest and best opportunity in the business, and the waves that AEW is making in the whole world of professional wrestling. From the very first All In event, I was very supportive of that. Simply for the fact that I knew what it could do to help change the business of professional wrestling. TNA, now Impact Wrestling, has been around for so long, and it's amazing that they're still around, and it's awesome they're still around because it presents opportunities for guys and girls to have a place to work and at a top level place. But what AEW was doing, is doing, and will do in the business of professional wrestling is just really, really cool. And the opportunities that, like I said, started it all in. And then the company itself was born, AEW. And then the first TV program, coming on TNT, and then the extension of the contract and everything that we keep doing, man. For me, like you said, going back to the whole mantra of everybody dies, it's like, take your chance now. Don't let anything pass you by. Kick ass now and apologize later if you have to.
And I feel like because you're making such an impact in AEW, you're kind of like this 20-year overnight success for a lot of people who maybe weren't familiar with your work.
Right. It's been funny, because there'll be sometimes when people, I consider myself, if you want to say I'm a former anything, I guess I would say I'm a former New Japan guy. But there's a lot of people that, New Japan was growing and becoming a more world-based company and had Access TV for a few years, and New Japan World gave them more opportunities for the fans around the world to see it and watch it on a regular basis. But it was still kind of a niche market. And there are people that were like, oh, wait, that's the dude, he was in WWE, or, oh man, I remember him from TNA. And I'm like, that was 15 years ago, stuff like that, and it's like, people are like, where has he been? What's he been doing? It's like, I've been wrestling the entire time. But, some people, because they only see what they see in the US market, when I showed up in AEW, it changed the game, because people, like you said, it was like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I never stopped. I never slowed down. But a lot of people didn't know because they only knew, TNA from 2005, or they only knew my, very, very short, ugly stint in WWE from 2009, 2010. So it's one of those things. It's kind of funny when people start saying that. And I'm like, no, I never stopped.
Well, you've made such a splash in AEW, but then it was taken to the next level.
I'm a big guy. So, it's going to be a big
I see what you did there. But also the fact that you're partnered up with Jake Roberts. I mean, I feel like that brings it to a whole new level. So is that something that you knew when you signed on, that you were going to be partnered with him?
Not when I signed on. I did, again, before everything really shut down, they came to Austin, Texas, and I went down there and had some conversations. And that was when it was first brought up, the idea. And there were a couple different options, and Jake and I just seemed to be the best fit. And, Jake being Jake and the legend he is, and his ability to go out there and cut the promos he can cut. For me, again, we talk about the fact that I've been out of the U.S. market for, nearly a decade at that point. And he was a perfect tool in that aspect to help reintroduce me to the U.S. audience, because people know, the legend that is Jake the Snake Roberts. They know when he gets on the microphone, you're paying attention, you're listening. So if he's talking about me and talking well about me, you're going, let's see what Lance is about. And for the people who either forgot about me, didn't know about me, or whatever the case is, it was an amazing reintroduction into the U.S. market working with Jake the Snake Roberts. I mean, I'd like to believe, the few opportunities I've had on the microphone with AEW, I've shown that I can speak. And, my crazy post-match interviews that I would do in Japan would show that, there's a crazy monster that can actually say some words without tripping on himself too much. But that Jake is the perfect person to help me be in a reader. There, I'm tripping on my words now. Be reintroduced to the U.S. market in a way that, just by myself wouldn't have been the same.
The Japanese style of wrestling is so different from the American style of wrestling. So what is it that you learned there that you're now bringing into AEW?
I brought AEW a true monster. They, I'm not saying that we don't have some monsters now, because we absolutely do, but I don't think that even the U.S. market, even within AEW, even with, in my opinion, a lot of the companies that exist today that people are watching, they weren't going to get the monster they were getting in the Murderhawk Monster, because I believe that I was bringing, channeling my Bruiser Brody, my Stan Hansen, guys that really made their names. Vader's, people know Vader, but Vader made his name and became the monster that Vader was because of his time in Japan. And I think that's what I learned over there. It was something and someone that I always needed to be. I just didn't know how to be that guy, in my early parts of my career. And the great thing, and I always tell people when they ask, is like, what did Japan do for you? How did it help you? And it helped my confidence in a way that I'd never had before. I didn't hear a lot of no's when I was in Japan. It was always like, yeah, very good, but more big, more strong, more monster. And I'm like, all right, you want more monster? I'm gonna keep doing crazy things, and it morphed and it changed from, there was a time, again, before the world went nuts, that, I was coming out and spitting water and throwing water and going through the audience, and I'd carry like 9 bottles of water. Everybody always try to count the bottles of water that I'd keep pulling out of my pants. And the fans loved it, like making signs and holding their kids up, like, please spray my baby with your water from your mouth, and it was pretty crazy, cool experience, and scaring kids, getting in their face and making them cry while their dads laugh because they loved every moment of it and things like that, things you can't get away with in the US. And so that's what I was doing. I was channeling that monster that I think you can really only find in Japan, and I was bringing it to the US market.
If there's someone who's maybe not familiar with the work you did in New Japan, what are, 2 or 3 matches that they need to go watch right now?
Oh man. Well, I mean, I think the one that I think most people saw, and it was kind of that reintroduction, that coming out party, because it was on live TV in the US, was the match with Will Ospreay at last year's G1 opening. I think the people who did know me, and even New Japan, kind of was like, Lance is good and he'll do his job. And we think we know what we're going to get from him. And we're okay with that. And then I was able to go out there, and Will, he's one of those guys like AJ Styles that if you have a bad match with Will, there's something really wrong with you. But I think I was able to step up in a way that people absolutely didn't expect to see from me. The same could be, again, I brought up AJ Styles. AJ and I had a match in the 2014 G1 Climax, and it was one of those amazing matches. Again, AJ Styles, if you have a bad match with AJ, there's something really wrong with you. Togi Makabe was a guy that I was kind of what we call married to when I first started with the company, and he helped me really develop, at the time I was calling myself the American Psycho. And he kind of helped develop that initial American Psycho. And, Minoru Suzuki, who's just known as a bad man, murder grandpa, as some people like to call him. He helped to develop me, in the time that I was in Suzuki-gun. And, obviously all the tag matches that Smith and I had, the different title matches we had at the Tokyo Dome. There's a real good one with Smith and I against Evil and Sonata from a few years ago at the Tokyo Dome. And, there's just, like I said, it's almost 9 years worth of matches that people could go and look up. So
there's a handful of great ones right there.
Yeah. Thank you.
As you look at the AEW roster, you've worked a handful of people, but who are you really excited to get in there with?
Oh man. And that was the cool part. I mean, part of the decision even coming to AEW was, who would you like to work with? And there were so many guys that I'd never even stepped in the ring with. Cody, I'd never worked with Cody before. We've known each other. We'd been around each other a little bit of time in WWE. Then obviously he came over and did some stuff in Japan and New Japan and Ring of Honor when I was doing stuff with them, but we never actually stepped in the ring together. Now Brody Lee. Brody's a guy that, he did a lot of good stuff in Japan, in a different company than I was in and at different times, but I think he and I can step in the ring. Brian Cage and I have stepped in the ring several times on like the independent level and whatnot, but we've never done it on a major stage. And we've always had amazing chemistry balancing, his style and my style and creating something that I think that you don't get to see from a lot of big men in the business. Omega, a guy that I never got to wrestle while I was in New Japan. Pac was, or Pac, he's somebody that, hopefully he's coming back, and with the world opening up a little bit, he'll be back working more often. There might be an opportunity to work there. The list goes on and on with guys that I've never even stepped in the ring with that are in AEW that I think I can have amazing matches with them, and matches that most people didn't think that they were going to be able to see. One of the matches I got to have leading up to my match with Cody was with Dustin, and Dustin and I had only wrestled one time ever before in WWE when he was doing Goldust, and that was 10 plus years ago. Yeah. And then when we stepped in the ring together, I think we did something fun and special that and two guys that, again, who hadn't touched in 10 years and had only wrestled one time before prior to that. Moxley and I, the only two times we've ever stepped in the ring together were at the Tokyo Dome and then just recently on Dynamite. And we've had an amazing, good chemistry and such good fights there. And, this, again, so many guys, I can't wait to actually step in the ring with Eddie Kingston and put his teeth down his throat, and we've never had that chance yet. So.
Yeah, I think you turned a lot of heads when you put that poor guy through the ceiling. What did that just happen spur of the moment, or did you guys go, all right, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna put you through the ceiling?
It was one of those cool moments that kind of morphed into that. The guy's name is Kentucky. He's if you watch a lot of Darby stuff, he gets killed by Darby a lot.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys. He was there, and I'd kind of come up with the scenario, the scene, where they were trying to interview us, and I just go in and destroy an entire locker room of guys. And, the guys that were all there were extremely cool to get the crap beat out of them like they did. And Kentucky was one of those that, again, he's a little more over the top in willingness to take crazy stuff. And one of the deals is like, what if you throw him into the ceiling? And they're like, that sounds amazing. Let's try it. And we did 2 takes, and that was the second one everybody saw.
No.
But it was great because he went into the ceiling, and then I threw him through a trash can, and I dumped him in a trash can on the way out. So it was a cool moment, a cool experience.
And for anybody that's seen any of Kentucky's stuff on Darby's Instagram, he's kind of he's like the new age Jackass, I feel like.
Absolutely. He's Steve-O with the death wish.
Yeah, I think what was actually worse than being thrown through the ceiling is the bump that he then took, 10 feet down to the ground, where he just collapses onto the ground.
Yeah, and then I think on one of the darks, I actually carried him out by his belt and chunked him onto the stage. So
I imagine you've always been a pretty big guy. How tall were you at age 13?
Oh, 13, I don't know. I mean, I graduated high school. I mean, I'm a little over 6'6" now, with boots on, 6'8". I think I graduated high school at 6'4", grew a couple more inches, as I went into college and whatnot. But I'm not a massive dude to begin with, but even then, coming out of college or high school,
you're a pretty big dude.
I'm okay. But, back then I was 6'4", 6'5", 198 pounds. So I was real thin beanpole, and football was my game, and I wanted to be a quarterback and whatnot. So, I wasn't really looking to try to put on any size. I was just looking to have a strong arm and be a good quarterback. And it wasn't until I got out of football that I, was interested in wrestling and kind of got into wrestling. And I had a conversation with somebody from WWE one time, and this was many, many years ago. I want to say around 2000 or so, 2001 maybe. And they were like, "Oh, how tall are you?" And I was like, "Oh, 6'6". And they're like, "Oh, I'd send them a picture, and they liked the picture. And they're like, "How much do you weigh?" And I think at the time I was 205, maybe 210. I went, "Yeah, 205, 210." They went, "Yeah, call us back when you're around 250, 260."
Wow.
They were basically without saying it, they were like, "You need to do some things to get a little bit bigger."
And how big are you now?
I think around 260, legit.
Yeah,
so
There you go. It only took you 20 years. No. So
20 years and a couple pizzas.
that's it. So was it that football was like the career path that you wanted to be on in high school? You thought I'm gonna be a pro football player one day. I mean, you live in Texas. That's life there.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it was one of those things like I went to a little small high school. I mean, we had like a total of 88 people graduate the year I graduated, and I think only 66 people actually walked to that day. And so it was a tiny little high school and whatnot. And yeah, I wanted to be a quarterback. You know, I would go out to our football field at night, and there was literally one big spotlight that shone on one of the goalposts. So I would take a tire and hang it from that goalpost in the middle of the night, and I'd take me, 5 or 6 footballs, whatever I had laying around the house, different sizes, Nerf balls to regular balls, whatever, and I would just go and do drop back passes for a couple hours every night, until my mom was yelling at me from the house. And then I tried to go to college and tried to play. The first school I went to was called Howard Payne University. We had 11 quarterbacks show up to camp. It was a NAIA school at the time, so they didn't have the NCAA restrictions as far as the number of players that could be, even in camps and whatnot. So we had 11 quarterbacks when I showed up, and the coaches kind of had their preconceived desires of who they were going to be playing and stuff. And so Howard Payne didn't really work out, and I ultimately transferred to a school now called Texas State University, but it was Southwest Texas, and I ultimately graduated from there. And I tried to play one season, but again, they did have the NCAA restrictions, but there were still, I think there were 7 or 8 quarterbacks when I showed up to camp.
Wow.
So it was one of those things like I wasn't ever the chosen one. So I was always, number 6 or 7 on the depth chart when I'd show up, and I'd do pretty well, but I was never really getting past any practice squad stuff, and ultimately got out of football and was just, going to school and bouncing at clubs in Austin, Texas, and was a fan of pro wrestling until, the owner of my club knew a guy that randomly started a wrestling school in Austin, Texas called the Southwest Wrestling Federation. And a guy that just probably shouldn't have started a school. I think when he first started the school, Ivan Putski was his head trainer, and Scott Putski was around, and they were doing the training, and Paul London was one of his first students in there. But then Paul left within like the first 6 months and started touring and doing his thing. Ivan and the guy who started the school had a falling out, so they left. So when I showed up, the guy who trained me was a guy named Solo Faitala, just this Hawaiian dude, Samoan dude that he was just a really good dude, really cool cat. But he didn't really teach me anything psychologically about the business. He just taught me, here's how you punch, here's how you kick, here's how you fall, here's how you do these moves. And there was one other dude in the class, and me and him, beat the crap out of each other about 2 or 3 times a week. And I didn't really start learning the business, the psychological aspect of it, until I started traveling with a bunch of Shawn Michaels kids, because he had a school in San Antonio, Texas.
Right.
That actually they offered to let me come to the school, but the price was too expensive and I couldn't afford it. So I started traveling with them, and that's kind of how I started really learning the business on the road and Texas independent wrestling.
Did you actually get to take some knowledge from Shawn as well, or just from his students?
No. Shawn started his school, and from my understanding, like his first couple classes, he was pretty well involved with, and a lot of the guys I traveled with were actually in the first couple of classes. American Dragon or Daniel Bryan was a part of one of those first 2 classes. Spanky was a part of that. And then a lot of the guys that I was traveling with, they were actually a part of those first couple classes. And then I think Shawn had his own kid at the time. And then I think a kid actually suffered a pretty serious neck injury in one of the classes. And those couple things combined kind of soured Shawn from being there. The school was still going on. Rudy Boy Gonzalez was the main trainer there. So he's the one that I dealt with mostly when I would go around there, and the students that were traveling with me to go places. And we were driving to an independent company in Dallas, Texas called PCW, Professional Championship Wrestling. And they actually ran a weekly show and had a TV show in Dallas, Texas. So it's my boy, my dog Buster's coming to say hello.
Hey, Buster. Oh, wow.
Making his appearance.
Just a little pup.
Yeah. Oh, no, he's a Labrador is what we've figured out. And I think this is about as big as he's going to get. He looks like a Labrador. Wow. He looks like a Labrador, but he's actually like a mix. So this is about as big as he's going to get.
What a great mix.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about your quarterback style. Which quarterback would you compare it to?
I don't know. I don't know if I truly had anybody that I would be compared to. I mean, I was a traditional like pocket passer. I wasn't. I definitely
drop
wasn't
back pocket passer.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was straight up, And I actually in high school, I convinced my coach because we didn't do any kind of shotgun. I got my center, and like for about a week or two, after practice we'd sit there and I'd get him to do shotgun snaps and. Like I showed my coach, so look, we can do this. And he's like, oh, okay. And he added it into the offense. So it wasn't even something that we had. So I was just a very traditional, Dan Marino-esque, I guess, without being as good as Dan Marino ever. I never would have come close to being Dan Marino, but, I guess in a sense, the tall, that kind of style, not extremely mobile enough, but not extremely mobile, but just a drop back in the pocket, maybe some sprint out type passes and stuff like that, but nothing of what today's quarterbacks can do. No Patrick Mahomes here, man.
Yeah, I know that boy. He's incredible to watch. Jeez. Yeah. Who were some of the wrestlers that you looked up to when you were a fan growing up?
See, I didn't start watching wrestling until my sophomore year in high school. So, and Sting was the guy that got me into it when he took on the Crow persona. And I don't even remember how I started watching it. I think, again, I liked the movie The Crow. And I think I must have just randomly, accidentally turned on WCW, and there was Sting standing in, full Crow-esque, standing in the rafters with the Crow thing going. I'm like, who's this guy and what's going on? And, not knowing his history and how big of a name he already was in the business. And then not learning that till later, but, just seeing that and going, well, I want to see what else happens here. And so I was a big WCW, Mark, as we like to say, fan. And, I didn't miss a Nitro, I think, from there on out.
Was there a certain person that you've stepped into the ring with in your career and you've been like, I can't believe I'm wrestling this person?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think my career has been more of situational rather than person. Obviously I've had a few times where, my short time in WWE where I got to go toe to toe with Kane and guys like that, and stuff of that nature. And those were cool moments to think of, So a fun story, and this is breaking kayfabe. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. So this is my fun story. There was a moment we had a random battle royal on SmackDown. And I remember we were all, everybody's in the ring, it had everybody from SmackDown at the time, the Rey Mysterios and Kanes and all this stuff. So, all the young guys who were just, starting on the company and whatnot, we obviously go with each other and we go to the people we were comfortable with and stuff like that. And Fit Finley, who was one of the guys that, helped train a lot of us and would come down to FCW and work with us a lot. So he was a guy that a lot of us were comfortable with. So we kept going to Fit. And I think if you could pull up the video of that battle royal, and I don't remember when it was, 2009 somewhere, you'd see a lot of the FCW guys that had, just been on the road or been on ECW prior to that. We kept going over to Fit, and then we'd immediately leave Fit and we'd go over to Kane. And it was because we get to Fit and we'd start beating up Fit, and Fit would be on the ground, he'd be saying stuff, and we go, what? And he go, go to Kane. So you just see guys go from Fit straight to Kane. And Kane was just getting so frustrated and fed up with it. It was like we're like ants that coming at him, and he'd throw his big uppercut and get away from me. Get away from me. It was funny.
In WWE, I don't know if a lot of people really realize this. You were in a WrestleMania.
Yeah, I was pre network. You had to get the DVD if you wanted to see my moment. And that's a really cool moment. Like talking about, as far as, are there any guys that I go, man, I can't believe I'm in here? And that was one of those, I could be sour, I could be bitter about my time there, but what good does that do me? It doesn't help me move forward in wrestling or life or whatever. And that was a cool moment to get to lace up the boots and walk down the ramp and get in the ring at a WrestleMania. And it was the pre-show battle royal that they would do pretty much every year. And I remember Tyler Rex was a good buddy of mine at the time, and he was right behind me, I think, when we were walking down the ramp. And it was just one of those moments, I think they said there was 72,000 people at that Mania that year in Arizona. And, there's probably 30 or 40,000 in the building at that point, because everybody's still filtering in or whatnot while we're doing this battle royal. And I just remember they were, playing the generic music as all the different wrestlers head down to the ring for the battle royal. And, it was huge, long rampway and whatnot. And it was just one of those cool moments. I look back at Rex and I was like, bro, can you believe this? And he's like, oh, this is too damn cool. Again, that we actually got to wrestle at a WrestleMania, even though it was just a pre-show battle royal that Yoshitatsu won. So
why couldn't you be Lance in WWE? Why did you have to be Vance?
This was still a time when, you know, there was no acknowledgement of anything prior to WWE, really. You know, nobody really got past it. I think Punk was like one of the only guys that had carried his name over from his time prior to WWE in that era. And Vance was a name that Dusty came up with. And I just, you know, they always had you submit as many names as you wanted to try to come up with a name for you down in FCW. And FCW was another thing that, you know, it was their developmental territory, but you kind of existed in obscurity. Whereas now with NXT, if you're on NXT TV, the wrestling, their audience knows those guys and girls, you know, so it's kind of hard to just be nothing and disappear. And so Vance was a name again that Dusty came up with, and Archer is actually my dad's first name. So that's why I wanted to use. Actually, when I was first using the name, I remember, you know, there were reports out that you know, former Lance Hoyt of TNA is doing a Robin Hood gimmick because of the Archer name, which was absolutely untrue. There was no truth to it whatsoever. I never donned green tights and carried a bow and did anything like that. So, which was funny. I was just like, no.
What does the tattoo on your left arm here say?
The left arm, it says, "Give justice each morning to those that you judge." And this one says, "The Lord is my strength, my fortress, and my refuge." Jeremiah 21:12 and 16:19. Wow.
So what was the first tattoo you ever got?
There was a 10 that is underneath this sun. And it was, I just turned 18, and a bunch of us from high school were like, let's go get tattoos. And we went to a tattoo shop, and we got there, and every single person punked out of it, you know, to say the least. And I was like, well, I'll get one, but I don't want to pay for it. And so they paid for it. I think it was like $25 to get a number 10. That was my high school football number.
Literally just the number 10.
Yeah, literally just the number 10. I think I added Eagles underneath it at some point later, and then ultimately the sun covered all that up.
Yeah, at what point were you like, all right, that's got to go. I'll cover this up now.
I think once, you know, I really gotten out of football, and I was like, oh, that doesn't really mean what it did then. You know, I think maybe if I had stayed in football, I would have left the 10 and just done stuff around it. But, you know, yeah, once I got out of football, and it, you know, the number 10 Eagles wasn't going to be the same meaning in the future, I decided to cover it up. And this is even morphed. It was just a black sun at one point, and then I added some depth to it and some color to it. So
what do you think is the biggest thing you've learned since being partnered up with Jake Roberts?
As far as, you know, wrestling, I understand myself really well.
Sure.
You know, you can always obviously learn. There's some amazing people around AEW that can always help me grow. And even the youngest talent that are coming up, because this is a whole new era of professional wrestling. You know, the guys and girls that are doing what they're doing in 2020, obviously, you know, I'm making myself sound old, weren't doing that when I first started. So I can always learn from them in the ring, whether it's, you know, the youngest person on our roster or somebody who's been around this business longer than I have. But with Jake, I think the one thing that he's helped me tremendously with, you know, in the promos, you know, I got my first real chance. I cut a small short one on Dynamite prior to the Moxley match that was good. And then I got to do one on Dark that was on Tuesday night, you know, and whatnot. And that was my first real chance to really speak. And I think that's one of the things that he's helped me out the most with, you know, understanding a cadence, understanding how to speak and what to say and when to say it, and you know, creating an emotional inflection when you say what you say, you know, the same with what you do in the ring, but doing it now on the microphone, because he's amazing. You know, when he's focused and he has a direction with what he wants to say, almost nobody better in the business.
You know, knowing what you know now, and of course, hindsight's 2020. If you could go back, is there anything you think you could change so that you wouldn't have been released from WWE?
You know, I always say that if I'd have done, like, what AEW is benefiting from now is my time post Japan. I always say if I'd have gone from like TNA straight to Japan and then probably shown up in WWE, I think it's a confidence level that I did not have in myself, not understanding who I was, what I should be, how I should present myself, you know, the monster that is now the Murderhawk Monster. Japan just helped me discover myself in a way that is, like I said, AEW is absolutely benefiting from that. And if and when I had done that prior to going to WWE, because I literally, like, I finished up with TNA on a Tuesday. My contract went null and void on a Wednesday. I was down in Tampa doing a tryout on Thursday, and then had a contract in my hand within a week, you know. So I literally had almost no time in between my TNA and WWE stuff.
Yeah.
Going to their FCW product, was really good for me. You know, some people are like, oh, you should just go straight to TV. And it's like, once I got there and once understanding how they do business, especially back then, being in FCW was very valuable to me. But I just still didn't know the confidence because, like I was saying, FCW existed in obscurity. When I debuted on their ECW product, I had short hair, no facial hair, you know, no jacket, nothing. And that was decided about 5 minutes before doors opened. I had hair down to the middle of my back, a goatee like I'd been sporting in AEW down to here. Had this big badass biker jacket that I wore, all these different, this image and this personality and this mentality that I had in FCW. That was, from my understanding later, that was the reason I got brought up.
Yeah.
But like literally like 5 minutes before doors open, and I'm standing in the ring, and Vince and Johnny are talking to each other. So I don't know what they're saying. And Johnny's like, "Hey, kid, come here." So what's up, Johnny? Cutting your hair. I was like, I'm on TV tonight. And he goes, yeah. I'm like, all right, whatever. You know, and they chopped my hair off and shaved my face and had me lose the jacket. And, you know, I always say I became big guy number 3 that day, you know, in the video game. And, you know, and you can't help but be shaken by that to a small degree, because there's not really, it's not like we're doing all this and this is the direction we need you to go. It's just like, nope, cut your hair, shave your face, lose the jacket, go. And it's like, well, what do you want me to do? I don't know. That's for you to decide. And you're like, okay, here I go. And like I said, some guys and girls can just like that and they figure themselves out in a split second and go and do it. But I think, again, if you're any kind of an artist and you have a mentality of, you know, who you are and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to be, and then all of a sudden that's completely taken away from you and told to go be something completely, not necessarily completely different, but not knowing what you were, you know, it can be mind-boggling to say the least. And
yeah, it's almost like it's like a clean slate, almost like you'd built up this whole thing and then like all went away.
Yeah, you literally, like, they took me in to see Vince after they cut the hair, and they're like, Vince, what do you think? He goes, yes, we're gonna break you down so we can build you up. I went, then you like it? And he goes, yes, now get out. So I left his office with that note, you know, and it was, like I said, it was never a bad situation. It was just I didn't know what I should be. And like I said, the confidence that I have now coming from Japan, I didn't have then. If I'd had it, it would have been a very different story, in my opinion.
I'm blown away sitting here talking to you that you're 44 years old. Like, you're the youngest 44.
Hey, not 44 yet. Not 44 yet.
43. Sorry.
Everybody dies. I'm gonna have to start with you, man.
What is the secret to maintaining this youth?
You know, God's blessed me beyond understanding or deservedness. You know, continuing to push myself on a physical level, you know, trying to control my diet, and you know, it's just doing all the little things that help a human being keep moving forward. You know, it's we live in a world now where a lot of people just don't want to go and get off their couch. And I think that's the thing, is I've never let myself sit still. And, you know, I make sure I go to the gym every day, and stretching has become such a huge part of my life, you know, and when you're younger, you don't think about those things, you know. Now that I'm a seasoned person, you know, it's become a big part of my daily routine, you know, stretching and understanding my body and pushing myself, but not pushing myself past the point of, you know, just being injured or something like that. And, you know, it's just, you know, keeping a positive outlook on things. You know, there's a lot of talking about all the time that I've had in the business. There were several times from getting let go from TNA to getting let go from WWE, you know, mentally those things can weigh on you if you let them. And I just looked at them as bumps in the road. And I said, you know what? Okay, cool. What's next? How do I keep moving forward? Which direction can I go now? You know, like I said, with TNA, it's like, as soon as I knew my time there was ending, I had somebody reaching out on my behalf, which ultimately got me a job there. And as soon as I found out my time with WWE ended, I reached out, because I'd gone to Japan a couple times before and worked like a small tour with All Japan, and I had a connection in Japan. And I was like, can you reach back out to All Japan? They did. All Japan agreed, but then tried to cut the money. I got them to agree to at least the same money that I had prior to my WWE spent. And then they just decided they weren't going to spend the money on any foreigners. So I had that same person reach out to New Japan. And I think New Japan, all they knew about me at the time, this was 2011, was he's a big guy. He just left WWE. So sure, we'll take a look at him. I showed up in Philadelphia because they were doing a small East Coast tour. And it was one of those moments where, like, Tiger Hattori, I'd known him for years because he'd come around TNA and whatnot. And Kojima, who was a champion at All Japan at the time, and then Suzuki. My history with Suzuki, the very first match I ever had in Japan was with a small independent company called Makahen. It was in a very tiny place that was like a 200, 300 seat, building. And I had a tag match against Suzuki, Minoru Suzuki. Did not know anything about Suzuki, his history, with his shoot fighting and pancreas and all that stuff. And I remember I came in, I kicked him one time because he was beating up my partner, and he didn't sell, he didn't move, he didn't budge. He just turned and looked at me real evilly. And I just went, cool, I guess I'll get out the ring right now, because I didn't know what else to do, because he was just like, and I was like, Murder Grandpa's going to get me. And I didn't know anything about him, So my history around Suzuki has been from the very first match I ever had in Japan. He was in All Japan at the time when I did my small thing with All Japan, and then fast forward to 2011, being paired with him and being the original Gaijin member of Suzuki-gun, and just that partnership, or those relationships that I already made with different people helped spawn, my nearly decade-long career with New Japan.
Yeah, I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and I'm very curious to know why you hate mint chocolate so much.
Because it's horrible. It's nasty, man. It's like you.
How dare you?
It's like you took chocolate and found your toothpaste and went, "This will be good," and put your toothpaste on it and then ate it. It's absolutely horrendous, man. Just stick with pizza, pineapple, and jalapenos, bro. That's the good stuff.
Pineapple does not belong on pizza, sir.
Absolutely belongs on pizza. It's sweet and sultry, and then you throw some jalapenos in to get it make kind of spicy. It's good for you.
It's all like mushy when you bite into it. It's the weirdest thing. I hate it.
Pizza's mushy. What are you talking about?
Pizza's yeah. I just think that is sacrilegious. That's what that is.
Well, you go eat your toothpaste and chocolate, and I'll enjoy my blissful pineapple pizza.
I like to say be great and be grateful. So I like to end every interview by asking you, what are 3 things that you're grateful for right now?
I'm absolutely grateful for my relationship with God. I mean, I know some people are on board with that and some aren't. And if you aren't, that's cool. This is how I feel about things, because I think without God, I would not be here today, 20 years later in the wrestling business. I would not be sane at all, because this world is crazy to begin with. I'm grateful for my family, because they've been absolutely supportive of my crazy career in the business of professional wrestling and traveling around the world and doing all the silly things that I've gotten to do. And then, I'm grateful for my health, for being only 43 years old and still being in pretty decent shape, and no major injuries to this point. I had one back surgery back in 2017 that New Japan took care of me on, and have been great since then. So it's one of those things. So God, family, and health, man, those are the 3 things I'm absolutely grateful for.
This was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing you as the AEW champion. I'm sure it's happening sometime soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Eventually, they're not going to stop me. Like I said in my little promo, I'm like the Jason Voorhees of AEW. I'm never going to stop coming. You can kill me as many times as you think you killed me, but I'm never going to stop coming.
This was great. Lance Archer, thank you so much, man.
I appreciate you having me on, man.
Isn't it crazy that the Murderhawk Monster that we see on TV is the same guy as the nice, kind gentleman that we just spoke with in this interview? Man. Huge thank you to Lance Archer for taking the time to share this conversation with us. Big thank you to you for hanging out with us and for subscribing to the channel. There's the reminder right there. And by the way, if you don't want to watch these interviews, there's always the option to listen on my podcast. Just search for The Chris Van Vliet Show. You'll find this interview with Lance and every interview that I've ever done. And I mention it off the top of this video, but this is seriously the best bag that I've ever owned. Not just the best looking bag, and I mean, it does look pretty good, but just the most functional bag. So use the code CVV, click those links below to get your own nutsack, or more specifically, the Tacksack 13.